colonization of Nigeria, as told by Jamie Hill and Michael Bodden. The colonization of Nigeria first started when the native people first came into contact with the Europeans after Portuguese ships arrived in 1486. Shortly following the Portuguese, the British, French, and Dutch all arrived as well, and almost immediately after their arrival, the slave trade was established. It soon became commonplace for communities to trade slaves that they captured in wars and raids to the Europeans for foreign goods such as metal, jewelry, guns, and liquor. The slave trade had serious implications on social structures, as power was soon derived from wealth and economic power as it changed from its previous basis of ritual and tradition. This change stopped when in 1807, after about 350 years of slave trade, the British decided that it was immoral and ceased trading. The first British colony in Nigeria was established when the British government annexed Lagos in 1861.
In 1886, the United African Company, which was founded by George Goldie, became the Royal Niger Company. The British government which chartered this gave the company all the territory of the basin of the Niger River. The Royal Niger Company administered the area and helped to keep France and Germany out. The first religious missions to Nigeria were by the Church of England's Church Missionary Society. The Protestants and the Roman Catholics followed in the 1860s. The Protestant missionaries divided the country into spheres of influence so they would not be competing. On the other hand, the Catholics worked with the Igbos, and the Church Missionary Society converted the people of Yoruba. Additionally, European missionaries reinforced colonial policy. Nigeria became unstable as a result of the Yoruba Wars and by European activities in the area. However, the British helped to abolish the slave trade in the region, and at the Berlin Conference in 1885, Britain's sphere of influence in the Niger Basin was granted. The British colony of Lagos was a cosmopolitan port and contained English speakers from Sierra Leone and emancipated slaves from Brazil and Cuba. Britain formed the Oil Rivers Protectorate to control trade coming down the Niger River. The Protectorate expanded its rule by diplomatic strategy and had to use military force in Djibouti, Oyo, and Benin. Britain acquired Benin in 1897, which completed the British occupation of southwestern Nigeria. 2 years later, Britain removed the charter of the Royal Niger Company because it was unable to control its territories. However, it kept its protectorate. In 1900, Frederick Lugard became the High Commissioner of the Protectorate of Northern Nigeria. He wanted to conquer all of Nigeria so the Nigerian rulers would recognize the British protectorate. Frederick Lugard used a policy of indirect rule where he governed through rulers who had been defeated. These emirs or governors had to accept British rule, abandon the slave trade, and work with the British officials in modernizing their administrations. These emirs were paid by the British to keep peace and collect taxes. The High Commissioners were above the emirs in the government and had unlimited executive and legislative powers in the protectorate. The small revenues that the colonial government had limited their progression in economic development. The protectorate lacked public resources, and they gained very little from taxes. To make matters worse, southern Nigeria had a lot of opposition to colonial rule from the Igbo people and from Yoruba land. However, it was quelled after a short period of time.
Having been assigned for 6 years as governor of Hong Kong, Lugard was sent back to Nigeria in 1912 to set in motion the merger of the southern and northern protectorates. This task of unification wasn't achieved until 2 years later, on the eve of World War I. 2 years after that, in 1916, Lugard formed the Nigerian Council, a consultative body that brought together traditional leaders to help have each part of the colony represented. Lugard then simply used to inform the traditional leaders of British policy at annual sessions, leaving the leaders without functions other than listening. Lugard was primarily concerned with consolidating British sovereignty and assuring local administration through traditional leaders until he stepped down as Governor General in 1918. Lugard's successor, Hugh Clifford, was a more liberal person with high recognition for his governorship of the Gold Coast. His approach was quite different from Lugard, arguing that the primary responsibility of colonial government was to introduce as quickly as practical the benefits of Western experience. He emphasized economic development, encouraging enterprises by Southerners in the North, while at the same time restricting Europeans to purely capital activity. believing that indirect rule wasn't correct for Nigeria. He argued that a split into two colonies was a better approach, unless a stronger central government could be formed to bind Nigeria.